Hello guys again. Today, second time. This time it's Games of the Week lecture. So for today's lecture, Games of the Week, I decided to prepare and analyze two games from the final match between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen from the Clutch Chess International. Which basically the matchup is like number one and number two in the world, so it was extremely interesting, especially after their first, the match, ended 12 draws, and then in the tie breaks that Magnus won against Fabiano. It was, I think, their first kind of like actually a match. Even maybe it was one earlier. I'm not sure, but like this, I feel like it was very interesting, and I was excited to see it and myself. So again, we had in those games there were many opening novelties, new opening trends and stuff. I decided to prepare the last two clutch games, both worth 3 points, and I just thought that they were the most critical to the entire match, especially that before the first clutch game, Magnus was leading, but Fabiano managed to win the first game, and Magnus was forced to win on demand the last one. So I was thinking that those games will be extremely interesting because both sides were under pressure to win their games, because otherwise the match would be simply over. So let's get started because the games were very interesting. So for the first one, Fabiano was playing with white against Magnus, so it was e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. Of course, Magnus is going for Sveshnikov, the same just like in the match, World Championship match in 2018. And Fabiano typically goes for Rossolimo, bishop b5. And in the match, the first game of the match in 2018, Magnus played g6. Later in St. Louis Rapid and Blitz, Magnus played e6. Also, we played e6 many times in the previous games against Fabiano in this clutch final. But in this game, he decided to play e5. And e5, this is already e5. Also, Magnus tried against Fabiano in one of the previous games in the clutch, in their match during this clutch final. I'll quickly also show this game because in this game, how to put it, Fabiano didn't choose the most, let's say, critical approach, and this one he actually did. So I guess he did some homework meantime between the rounds or something. I don't know, maybe he recalled his analysis, or I don't know. I just thought that this was a correct approach to this line. So short castle, bishop d6, and right now in the first one, in this game, Fabiano played c3. And the first game that they played was d3, went with d3. But I feel like Magnus comfortably equalized here and eventually got very good position. So in the game happened knight f6, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, a6, bishop c4, bishop e7. And actually this position reminds me a lot about some Italian, but with the difference that pawn is on c5, not on c7. I think Italian Italian game would be pawn on c7 in the exact same position. But here, and maybe if pawn a6 would be just, let's say, pawn d6, so it's pretty similar, but here we already have pawn on c5. And very often in those positions, actually black pawn is well placed on c5 because it controls more of a center, and it makes it harder for white to play d4. So in this game, I feel like Magnus equalized pretty comfortably, and after, let's say, c3, short castle, knight bd2, d6, a4, knight h5, bishop g3, g6, all of those moves were pretty natural, and I don't think that Magnus have had here any problems. I feel like he quickly, around here, he took over the initiative and went on winning eventually the game. So, but let's not discuss this. Just want to quickly bring it up in order to show what happened with their previous encounter in this line. So right now, Fabiano played c3, and this is more critical because immediately the idea is to play d4. Magnus played a6, and right now, I mean, there have been many games actually here. But I was pretty surprised to discover that you know, it's not so popular move e5. Like normally when people play this Rossolimo, they play either g6 or e6. They are the two most popular moves. But e5 is not so popular, but there have been some games lately here as well, actually. So c3, a6, and right now there have been Fabiano played bishop a4, which is the best move. However, there are alternatives. So just quickly to cover them. If let's say bishop d3, where they have bishop c2 and d4, it doesn't bring much because at knight f6, let's say bishop c2 and short castle. And the thing is that d4 doesn't bring much because after d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes, e takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and now queen c7. Because of this bishop on d6, pawn on h2 is very often subject of the attack, and also bishop on c2 also runs under this queen on c7. So black simply wins the pawn. Let's say if h3, black can either take on c2. Also, it's possible to play b5 with very good position, and simply this is just extra pawn for black. Of course, white can take on d5, but there, you know, at least there is very good development advantage with bishop e6. Also, there could be some moves like knight takes f2 sometimes. They're definitely worth attention. They deserve attention. So this basically black is doing very well here. Bishop d3 is therefore not really a thing. Bishop c6 played Anish Giri, one of the top players. So I thought that could be interesting, and the idea of d takes c after d takes c6 would be just to play d4 as quickly as possible. After all, with a6, black are not developing really pieces, so it makes sense to take on such a, you know, let's say aggressive approach and play, you know, play d4 and immediately create something in the center. But actually, after bishop takes c6, takes d4, e takes d4, c takes d4, bishop g4. In the game, Giri rapport, Richard rapport easily equalized and even was better in his game. So the game happened e5. If d takes c5, bishop c5, there is no problem. Any problem for black. Position is just really good. The pair of bishops just offers great chances for black. In the game happened e5. D takes, bishop c7, d takes c5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, and bishop takes e5. And I believe that black is simply more comfortable here because of the bad pawn structure for white. So this is not really a thing, this bishop c6 either. Bishop c4 finally, I thought also is interesting because puts some pressure on f7 possibly, on this diagonal, maybe bishop d5 as well. So, but here also knight f6 is pretty much easily equalizing. Let's say if d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, e takes d4, and the only thing that right now black has to memorize one line, but if white black memorizes, it's just simply very easy. So if let's say knight takes d4, then take queen c7 is always a problem for white. Black is doing immediately well because after h3, let's say b5, bishop b7, short castle. Black has very good piece play. Bishop comes to e5. Very often d5 is may come very quickly, and it's a very good position for black. If knight c3, it doesn't really change much. Of course, we can't take on c3 because queen takes d6. But like if you just play castle first, it's pretty much the same stuff. b5, bishop b7. Also on h2 is king right now. Bishop e5. Similar stuff. Black is doing generally well here. But only thing what happens after e5, because this is critical. If e5, right now black has simply only move, bishop takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5. And after rook e1, of course, right now, if d6, then f4 simply is winning. I'll just quickly put it on the board. This is simply winning because there is the spin and we cannot save our knight. But in this position, there is move short castle. After short castle, rook takes e5. There is move here, queen c7, and after queen takes d4, there is move d5, and this is actually very nice because suddenly both bishops are hanging, and there is no way to to defend both, because it's just such a little bit weird pin on this c file, but basically black wins the bishop back, and with total equality, basically, without any problems. So the same thing can happen, let's say in this position, after bishop c4, knight f6, let's say white tries with this move, but this is exactly same story. Exactly same story. So let's say if queen d takes d4, d5, knight c3, right now bishop queen takes c4, rook takes d5, nice tactical move, winning back the pawn, takes, and right now let's say h6, bishop f4, bishop e6. This is just deadly equal position. There is no way that either of the side can really win this, realistically. So it's just equal. So also bishop c4 is therefore not a good choice. However, bishop a4, and right after b5, bishop c2, knight g7, Fabiano decided to play d3. There have been many alternatives as well. There is move a4, there is move d4. I don't want to dive into details, but personally, it feels to me that a4 could be the most precise. If a4, the thing is that if rook b8, a takes b5, a takes b5, and d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, e takes d4, and right now, if queen takes d4, right now after queen c7, h3. The problem is for black that pawn on b5 is very often object of the attack by the knight. And for instance, if bishop b7, knight c3, and white has very simple development, and normally this bishop e5 could be a problem, could be an idea, but doesn't really bring much because already pawn b5 is hanging, and white controls the a file, which is normally very good for white. And the thing is that if d4 would happen, it's exactly same line, but it's less good for white, because after, let's say, h3, bishop b7, as earlier with knight c3 was very good. Right now knight c3 is not so good because of b4, and pawn on a6 covers b5 square. So this is a huge difference. That's why a4 I would play a4 at first, but probably it's quite a new line, so probably the theory will be start developing here. So we can possibly, if Fabiano plays against Magnus this again, or more like Magnus decides on the 3-5 here again against Fabiano, maybe we'll see new, in next games, maybe we can see like developments in the theory here. For now, Fabiano played d3. Knight g6, but I think that this is pretty much calm approach where black should be doing quite well. Maybe it's around equal, maybe white slightly better. It's difficult to say. It's kind of typical, let's say, Ruy Lopez / Italian position structure, which is depends on the perspective, and depends also on the style of players who play. What's going on there, but personally, objectively, it feels to me that black should be doing quite well. Therefore, I think that this a4 move is the most testing. But anyway, d3, knight g6, bishop e3, short castle, knight bd2, bishop e7, and right now bishop b3 played Fabiano. Idea is to play bishop d5, very logical. d6, bishop d5. And right now, I'm not entirely sure whether I like Magnus' move, because he played queen e8, and I'm not entirely sure whether this is correct or not. It's definitely possible, but I was wondering what's wrong with queen c7. It just seems like it's a little bit more natural, and I understand that could be some problems on the c file sometimes, like here. Let's say rook c1 would be a problem, but after all, we don't have to take with the c pawn. We can keep our pawn on c5, and play, let's say, move bishop b7. And to be honest, I don't really see any problems here for black. Also, the threat is knight b4, so if there's, let's say, rook c1 could be met by knight b4, and we trade basically those bishops. Queen would be very well placed on b7. Let's say rook c1, knight b4, knight bishop takes, queen takes. I think that black is doing quite well here. So I don't really see a problem with queen c7, because queen e8 is also possible, but it's a little bit extravagant. I thought that queen c7 is just very simple with around equality here, but Magnus had different opinions. So queen e8, d4, e takes d4, c takes d4, and rook b8. And as we see the difference in this position, we could have played easily bishop b7 with queen on c7. We could easily play bishop b7. Right now, bishop b7 is a little bit weird because we are basically pinning ourselves with this bishop on b7, so it makes literally no sense. So Magnus played rook b8, which is also a very good move. Rook c1, and right now Magnus played very good move, knight b4. I'm not saying that this is better for white by any means. Queen e8 is also a very legit move which Magnus played. I just personally, my personal preference here is queen c7. Like queen on e8 is okay, but just queen c7 looks much more natural, at least to me. But queen e8, this is also fine for black, rook b8. And right now, rook c1. This is the critical position, one of the critical positions, and Magnus correctly chose and played here knight b4. Hitting on this bishop on d5, maybe threatening knight d3 and c4. Pretty much very good move. The alternative would have been to play c4, but right now this was clearly worse for black because of bishop takes c6, a very important move. Queen takes c6, d5, queen c7, and right now b3. Basically, white undermines the pawn on c4, and basically entire pawn chain on the queen side. So if c3, right now b4, and position wise, I feel like white's position is preferable because pawn c3 is very likely to be lost, and it's much easier to play this position with white rather than with black. Of course, black can hope for some compensation here for this pawn because of the extra because of the pair of bishops and potential, let's say, f5 and stuff like this. But it's I don't have really too big faith in this. Overall, I believe white should be slightly better here. So knight b4 was a very good move. D takes c5, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and finally we get to the most important position of this game. Pretty much this is the critical position of this game because right now Magnus made a huge mistake, after which Fabiano took over the initiative and took over and basically almost didn't let Magnus out even for a second. But why I say almost, we'll see this we'll see it soon, because I'm gonna show one position where actually Magnus had a great chance to complicate things like crazy for Fabiano, but he didn't do it. So, but I'll get there in a moment. So bishop takes c5 happened in the game, and right now Magnus played knight takes d5, which is a big mistake. After e takes d5, bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, Magnus is simply pawn down. After bishop b7, knight b3, there is no enough compensation, just extra pawn for white, and simply just lost position for Magnus. Maybe still not lost, maybe there are still some chances, practical chances, but like overall there is no compensation for this pawn. So knight takes d5 was a big mistake. Instead, I analyzed bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, and I thought this was much more natural. And right now there were two good moves for black, and both were leading to extremely complicated positions. And to be honest, I'm not sure what's going on because it's just so complicated. Possibly position just around equal with correct play. So knight d3 is one move, which is very logical to hit on this rook on c5 and present rook knight takes b2. And second move is knight f4. Both, and basically it's after knight f4. Idea of knight f4 is to bring this improve this knight, bring it to the closer to the king side, and try to look for some attack or like just compensation for the pawn that was just lost on c5. Let's start with knight d3. Knight d3, let's say I don't know, if rook c3, knight takes b2, queen a1, knight takes knight a4. I don't see any real problems here for black. I feel like position just equal. Black took back the pawn, and this is just okay for black. So the only sort of chance to play this for a win would be to play rook c2. And after rook c2, knight b4, rook c3 I was thinking. But right now this is just much worse, very soon, because rook c5 is just knight d3. But this is it just could be repetition. So after rook c3, knight takes d5, it takes d5, bishop b7. This is much worse version of what happened in the game, because in the game rook was on c5 is already supporting pawn on d5, and right now this pawn d5 is very likely to be lost, because it's, you know, black can very quickly play rook d8, knight f4, and this rook is not supporting this pawn. It's still white has to spend one tempi to defend this pawn. So I feel like black has good compensation for this pawn here, and position is just around equal. Another move is here is knight f4, which also would lead to lots of complications, and especially like in rapid chess, this would probably cause, you know, possibly some practical problems for Fabiano. So let's say knight b3. Alternative could be, let's say, knight d4. And after knight d4, the idea is, let's say, to play knight 2 to f3 and to kind of like put some knights in the center. But right now, black has very interesting try rook b6 and bring the rook to the through the 6th rank to the king side. Knight to f3, let's say queen e7, queen c1, everything comes with tempis, knight b d3, rook c7, queen d8, queen c2, and bishop g4. And the idea of rook g6 still is there, but position is just extremely complicated. It's just so unclear that, you know, anything can basically happen. Black has definitely good compensation for this pawn. So this was better for black. This was what black should have done. Either is knight f4 or here knight d3. But if knight b3 here, knight f4, knight b3, I thought just bishop e6 is decent, and this is just, you know, this is just pretty much equal position. There is no way that, you know, white could be better here, because just, you know, equal material, pretty much very balanced position. So this was where Magnus made a mistake. Bishop takes c5, and right now he played knight takes d5. Instead, if he's just taken, and either knight d4, knight d3, his position would be pretty good. So, but he played knight takes d5, and right now Fabiano didn't let Magnus out even for a moment, almost, but because there was actually one moment where Fabiano made a big mistake. So bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, bishop b7, knight b3, all correct. Right now queen d7, possibly queen d8 was a little bit more accurate, because after queen d7 there is knight a5. Queen d8 prevents that, but still queen d2, rook c8, let's say this, knight a5 anyway gets there. Position is pretty much nearly hopeless. Just extra pawn for white, and very, very likely just winning position. The game happened queen d7, knight a5, bishop a8, knight c6, knight just gets to the perfect square, and knight rook e8, knight d4. There were alternatives, but Fabiano's approach was very, very good as well. Queen d6, b4, supporting the rook, rook e4, queen f3, rook e8, knight f5, queen d7, and this position, this was actually the first moment where Fabiano could have played knight b8, and this was just winning nearly on the spot. It was a little bit complicated right now. Knight b8, of course, rook b8 is queen e4, wins on the spot. So if queen a7, this was probably a little bit complicated to find over the board, because right now queen c3, f6, and d6 is just very strong. We just have to leave this knight on b8, and there is nothing that black can do, because rook b8 is met by rook c7, and queen b8 is met by d7 simply, and this is just game over. But it could be hard to find, let's say, at the board, especially, you know, under such amount of stress as the clutch game it is. So g3 is not a bad either way, not a bad move either way. h6, let's say h4, king h8, Magnus just stays in place. Knight d3, just improving the position, everything correct. King g8, rook c1, bring the rook to the game, perfect technique. Knight f8, knight f5, knight h7. Magnus tries to bring this knight to f6 to create some pressure on d5 pawn, but, you know, it's, let's say, decent practical chance, but still it's just lost. And right now Fabiano was just winning with knight b8 immediately. We just curtains, just 1-0 immediately, because after queen a7 there is simply rook c8, and there is nothing that Magnus could do. Queen e4 is a big threat right now. So if bishop takes d5, anyway queen takes d4 wins, because after this knight f8 takes, queen b8, and finally move in very important move, rook c8. and this is just game over. And I don't think it's a very, very complicated line to find, especially that knight b8, rook c8, you sort of can stop calculating. You just kind of like, you see that it should work, like it generally should work. Because queen e4 is just a big threat, such a big threat that, you know, it just seems like it's overwhelming. At least it could be a good try to play knight b8, because after queen a7, at least if you don't play even rook c8, you can always come back knight c6, and it's at least good testing move you know, good testing move that white could do in order to test whether black can, you know, can play queen a7, which is the best move, or maybe something else and win on the spot. So knight b8 was simply winning. That's just basically game over. There is nothing that black can do. But instead, Fabiano played here move king g2, and this is a big mistake. Like, I was surprised to realize this, but it nearly throws all of the advantage. White still is somewhat better here, but it leads to right now the position can easily get out of hand. The thing is that Fabiano here had like few minutes, like maybe, I don't know, 3-4 minutes or maybe 2, I don't remember exactly, and Magnus was playing on increment, like this 5-second increment that they had. So of course, like if you play king g2, of course I'm gonna play, let's say, move like king h8, try to you know, just wait it out. But the thing is, after king h8, let's say knight b8 right now, finally Fabiano played it, and this is just game over, because they repeated once, and now knight takes a6, and this is just, you know, few moves happened, and just, you know, game over. This is just, you know, taking on b7, you know, anything wins. So this is how the game ended. But in this position, after king g2, suddenly Magnus could have, I think, I'm not entirely sure, but like I think he could have maybe saved the game, and even if not saved the game, he definitely could put much tougher resistance to Fabiano, and the best move was to play g6. And this is actually, if you think about it, it's pretty logical, because strategically, of course, black is lost, completely lost. Pawn down, much worse pieces. The only sort of hope for black to save this game would be to create some mess, some, you know, muddy the waters, like create some complications. The only way. Otherwise, just game over. And this is what happened in the game. That he played king h8, he didn't do anything special. Suddenly, knight b8, and this is just over. So if you play here g6, you are attacking this knight on f5, right? And it's not so clear what to do here, because let's say if the knight goes out of the f5, let's say knight goes to e3, there could be played, for instance, a move like queen d6, and if I get, or maybe even king g7, if I bring my knight to f6 and I challenge this pawn on d5, it could be extremely complicated to win this with white, even though it's so nicely placed, everything. So knight h6 is by far the most critical move. But after king g7, suddenly the knight has no squares to go, right? Because on f5 is covered, g4 is covered, f7 is covered as well. So seemingly white is just losing the piece. But the thing is that still white has such a good position here that there is knight b8 again working. And knight b8, queen b7, still right now both knights are under attack, and knight takes a6. And the idea is that there is knight c7, rook c7 coming, and queen a6 is not possible because it's hanging on f7 as well. But actually, no, sorry, queen a6 is possible, but it's not by far not easy to realize and to understand. Suddenly position gets completely wild, and on increment and basically in time trouble, it can go simply either way in such position. So right now black has two moves, either rook e7, trying to cover r7, or play queen takes a6. So I feel like rook e7 is inaccurate, because after, let's say, rook c6, king takes h6, h5, white maintains the strong attack, and white should eventually win. However, it's again by far not so clear over the board when you see it, because takes, let's say knight c5, queen h3. Such lines are not easy to, let's say, find and understand during the game, especially that here the exchange is lost on c6. There could be some rook e2, some activity, and so on. Maybe rook c7 try to take this pawn on c6. You know, there are definitely some practical chances for black, even though objectively white should be winning anyway. but you know, at least from practical perspective, as I said, it offers much tougher resistance here for black rather than what Magnus did in the game. Another possibility here is just even stronger, is queen takes a6. After queen takes f7, king takes h6, rook c6, seemingly white just, let's say, I mean, takes, either queen or white either wins the queen on a6 or just checkmate on g6. But after queen takes c6, queen takes c6, d takes c6 is simply, pawn is also very strong, knight on 7 is horrible, but there's move rook e6, which is just, you know, computer chess, obviously, but it suddenly can save the game, or nearly save the game. Like, you know, of course, white is still better, but like, you know, it's not so clear, because rook a6, the rook takes a6. Suddenly, knight will have the square on f6, d pawn is stopped, and, you know, can go either way. So the best chance I thought is rook takes e6, but after rook takes e6, of course, d takes e6, queen takes e6 wins for black, so white has to go for this. Rook takes e6, d takes e6, and queen c6, and suddenly, you know, it can go either way. Like, I mean, it cannot go either way. Black definitely cannot win this because the direction is so bad, but definitely there are big chances for you know, to save this, because there are always some perpetual checks possible. Let's say, I don't know, and if, let's say, king h2 or something, there's, let's say, move queen d5 or maybe queen c4, trying to pin the pawn and the queen. And if the queen, let's say, goes somewhere, then the knight maybe can join the game. And, you know, if the, let's say, black stabilizes, then, you know, who knows what's gonna happen. It's pretty much completely new game, and anything can happen. I believe that white's still somewhat better, but it's by far not clear what's going on here whatsoever. So g6 would have led to completely wild game, and who knows what would have happened. So this was basically the only moment where Fabiano made this mistake with king g2. Instead, king b8 just wins the game on the spot. So, but after this, king g8, king h8, knight b8, this is how the game ended, and, you know, very nice win by Fabiano in general. Apart from this move king g2, which would nearly blow, which could blow the game. So this is it for this game. That's how Fabiano won. Very nice game, and let's see how Magnus managed to make a big comeback in the next game, which is the following one. So c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, g3, bishop b4. Magnus sticks with his English, and right now e4. This is the same move that Magnus played against Fabiano in World Championship match in the tie breaks. So I'll just quickly bring this game, because in the tie breaks I think Fabiano was surprised, and in this game happened knight g short castle, knight g2. One more thing, normally people play here bishop g2, short castle, e4, but the thing is that after bishop takes c3, it is considered that black is doing quite well. However, if we start with e4 short castle, we can start right now with knight g2. And if bishop takes c3, we always take the knight to c3, and this should be good for white. That's the entire idea of playing e4 first. Of course, this gives possibility to take here on c3 immediately, and we'll discuss it in a moment. But after a short castle, knight g2, c6 is what happened in their first match in the first game in the World Championship match in the you know, in the tie break. Bishop g2, a6, this is a little bit inaccurate. Short castle, b5, and right now there's a move d4. And ever since this moment, Magnus seized the initiative and comfortably, I believe so, won the game, because right now he got this bare pawn structure, extra the pair of bishops, and this extra pawn for black is not really relevant. After this, in this endgame, pretty much Magnus was all the time in charge. Here I remember in this position, knight b7 was the best move, with pretty much still some chances and possibly a clear position, but Fabiano made a mistake with knight b5. After knight c5, this was pretty much very bad for black here. So anyway, I believe in this position white definitely has very good chances. So it's not a surprise that Magnus repeats this line so often. Bishop takes c3, and right now d takes c3 is the most popular one. But b takes c3 Magnus chose for this game is much less explored, and you know, if he wanted to kind of create some game and get some, you know, winning chances, some basically practical chances, some game basically going on, b takes e3 is pretty much the right, let's say, approach to do it, because, you know, it leads to more unexplored terrains and so on. So short castle, f3, and right now the idea here for white in general is to play, let's say, knight h3, knight f2, maybe play d4 at some point, and try to, you know, build strong center, and maybe get to f4 at some point. In general, try to make good use of the pair of bishops by creating, hopefully, either attack on the king side or some pressure in the center, and open the center eventually and make use of the pair of bishops. Having said that, Fabiano decided to play immediately move b5, which is, by the way, I think that f3 move right now is a novelty. If I'm not mistaken, f3 is a novelty. Bishop g2 will still transpose to the other line, but f3, I think, in this position is a novelty. But Fabiano right now played move b5, which is extremely interesting, and we need to ask ourselves, what does it do? And the answer is, it simply challenges white's center, considering that white hasn't developed any of the pieces yet. They're on the back rank, while black king is already safe on the king side. Knight is developed, and if black can quickly get some action in the center, black will be definitely doing well. Alternative could be, let's say, rook e8, which also makes a lot of sense. And right now I analyze funny move, king f2. King f2 with idea of playing simply, let's say, after d6, let's say going for g4, immediate attack. And who knows, maybe this is what Magnus would have played. If knight e2, the idea is also knight e2, knight g3, h4, maybe d4, and this pawn chain of pawns e4, f3, g4 is pretty much giving quite solid center, and white can hope to create some attack on the king side. Of course, position is completely unexplored. There have been no games like this, and I think that there could be some, you know, new theories could be easily be developing here. Especially the Magnus went for it. So b5, d4, let's say, b takes c4, g5 analyzed, and this position is pretty much completely unclear. And I would assume that Magnus was hoping for something like this. I don't know if b5 came as a surprise to Magnus or not, but he played d4, which is by far the best move. The thing is, if c takes b5, d5, and this is exactly what black wants. After d3, let's say, trying to stabilize the center, black continues the approach of sacrificing, keeping this pawn, being kind of like pawn down, but developing all the pieces of the game. So c6 is one possibility, and another possibility is a6. Both moves are pretty good, and both lead to completely, let's say, unclear positions. Let's say after a6, I like personally a6, so I'll just stick with this. If b takes a6, let's say, bishop takes a6, knight h3, c5 is possible. Also, c5 immediately is possible to postpone taking on a6, but right now this pawn is simply irrelevant. Black has very good advantage in development of pieces. Let's say knight h3, queen a5 analyze, bishop d2, c4, again challenging the center, takes on d5, bishop a6, knight f2, queen d5, queen c6. Pawn in c4 is pretty much lost. Extra pawn for white, sorry, extra two pawns right now don't matter because pawn c4 is lost. And this extra pawn, which will be, let's say, after bishop e2, bishop c4 takes, will not be really relevant because black's pieces activity is just so big. Also, black can postpone taking on c4 by playing knight d7, knight b6 at first. So I feel like it's just really good position for black. So therefore c takes b5 is too greedy. c5 is also possible, but again, just d5 takes, if bishop takes b5, queen a5, let's say, and if queen a4, queen c7, very strong move. And again, this piece is black has compensation for the pawn because of the prospects in the center by playing d5 and the fact that white pieces are still not developed fully yet. So for instance, I analyze bishop a3, trying to stop d5, rook d8, knight d2, d5, e takes d5, knight takes d5. All this pawn structure is pretty, sorry, I should maybe put red marker. All this structure is pretty weird, and I feel like black has really good position here. So c5 is also not great, therefore Magnus played d4, which is a very strong move. E takes d4, c takes d4, b takes c4, e5 by far the strongest move, because if bishop c4, probably just d5 is just great for black. Let's say e takes d5, knight takes d5. This d5 square for the knight is just very powerful. If we can even trade the bishops, black will be just much better. Maybe not much better, but clearly better. E5, knight d, so e5. And right now this is the first critical position, and I'm not sure if Fabiano kind of mixed up his lines or something, because I'm pretty sure he prepared all of this. But right now I feel like rook e8 is the best move. And the idea behind rook e8 is that right now there is no better move than king f2, because if black can play d6 right now, next move, and challenge the center, you know, for instance, bishop c4, d6, if knight d2, d takes e5, immediately black challenges the center, and there is no any problems here whatsoever for black. It's just extra pawn. White may hope for some compensation, but it just hopes. There is no really big compensation for this pawn. So king f2 I thought is the best move, but right now after knight d5, bishop takes c4, knight b6, next d6, the difference is that relative to what happened in the game, white king is on f2 and black rook developed already to e8. So this inclusion of king f2 and rook e8 is definitely in black's favor. So for instance, I analyze here bishop d3 or bishop b3. If let's say bishop d3, d6, f4, bishop a6. If takes, let's say knight f3, and right now knight b4, for instance, looks very good for black. Trying to get knight from a6 to d5. And I feel like, of course, position is pretty much still unclear, but I feel like black is doing quite well. Definitely no any problems, especially that, you know, Fabiano won the first clutch game, and this is not what Magnus would like to play for a win here. This is kind of my suspicion only, but this is what I think. If bishop b3 makes a little bit more sense, because bishop a6 never will trade the bishops, but right now again d6, and let's say if f4, knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4. This position is very unclear again, but it seems to me that black is doing quite well. For if bishop e3, knight a5, let's say bishop 2, knight c4, this king on f2 is always a problem, and black in general should be able to put some pressure in the center. Other possibilities would be h3, but then bishop takes f3, king takes f3, king takes f3, because if queen f3, of course knight takes d4 wins. So if king takes f3, queen d7, this king on f3 is, you know, not really comfortable, right? And with the next, let's say, move rook a d8, then d takes e4, now we'll come to d4, c5. Black has very good play, I believe. I'm not saying that black is better, but definitely black doesn't have any real major problems. So bishop e3, let's say, knight a5, bishop c2, knight a c4, changing this bishop on e3 with some queen c6 next, possibly. Maybe I don't know, d takes e5 and rook a d8 next move. Many possibilities for black. If king g2, of course, if black can take this bishop, it will be such nice knight on d5. Definitely no problems at all. So I just think that this position is just very good for black, and that's why I would suggest playing here as black rook e8. There will be no games like this, but my assumption would be that if the figure will develop eventually, it will develop here with after rook e8, because after knight d5 immediately bishop c4, it's not so easy, I believe, because knight b6 probably is still the best move, and try to play d6, but the difference is that right now white king can still castle, right? So let's say bishop d3, d6, queen c2, h6 I analyzed, and this position is pretty much unclear, like knight c4. It's just very unclear position, and to be honest, I'm not sure who is better here. Possibly it's just equal. It's difficult to analyze this. I didn't want to dive into too deep these lines, because, you know, it's just so unclear, and there are also other lines that I want to cover, especially in the previous game. So, you know, I just had to limit you know, what I'm talking about today. But anyway, this was very likely very good for black, but also leading to completely unclear positions. If bishop b3, knight c6, f4, bishop a6 is again, bishop stops the king side, the king from castling to the king side. Bishop a3, d6. The idea is in general for black to challenge the white center, and if white black can do it in good way, like we're doing right now, and I believe that black has very good position. In general, all the time black wants to play on the light squares, making good use of this square on d5, and very often also c4. So I feel like this position is just pretty much unclear. Black has to white has to play, let's say, king f2, but then let's say knight ac4, queen d3, g6, rook a g1. Let's say, I don't know, not queen c8 is weird. Let's say rook f8, maybe rook a d8, preparing moves like c5. Actually, if I think about it, queen c8 also it makes sense because it just protects bishop on a6. Knight d5 is a threat, so it's also not so easy to play this position with white. It can easily turn around, and white could be simply better here. So knight b6 was, I think, again a little bit more accurate, but bishop b7 is also okay. But right now I feel like white is slightly better after knight h3. After knight b6, black will be basically doing well. After bishop b7, knight h3, I feel like position is sort of leaning towards white evaluation. So d6. It's still not nothing bad, but it's a little bit more pleasant play this position with white. d6, short castle, and alternative would be, let's say, queen d3. And the idea is, of course, knight g5. And I think this was maybe a little bit more accurate. However, it's by far not clear. h6, rook b1, let's say, bishop c6, short castle, d takes e5, d takes e5, knight d7. This is what I analyze. If bishop takes d5, knight c5. Knight takes e5 even. So if rook e1, rook e8, f4, and right now knight to b6. In all those positions, black tries to play on the light squares, which very often gives good counterplay. And this position is not an exception. Black should be doing quite well. However, bishop after this, knight f2. You see the difference. In the previous positions, the king was easily on f2 and was easily attacked. Right now, it's safe on g1 on the king side, and white managed to develop all the pieces. And it's definitely not so easy to play this position. However, still, I believe black should be doing quite okay. But if I have to choose sides right now, I would choose white. So queen d3 was possibly a little bit better alternative. It doesn't mean that it like gives certain advantage, but it's definitely a move that deserves attention. Magnus played right now short castle, which also is a very good move. Knight d7, rook e1, building, strengthening the center. D takes e5, and this is the first critical position. The first one out of two critical positions in this game, because right now, what to do next here with black? It's like knight on d5 is hanging. We need to do something about it. So Fabiano decided to play the most, let's say, natural move, which is knight 7 to b6, and this is definitely a good move. However, I personally believe that queen e7 is even stronger. Queen e7 is stronger, in my opinion, because first of all creates a threat. Queen takes queen c5 check, winning the piece. And let's say white can deal with it in many ways. I thought the best, one of the two most natural ways is to play either bishop takes d5, accept the challenge and take this knight, or play queen d4, covering c5 square. So let's say first queen d4. If queen d4, knight b6, let's say bishop f1, and right now I feel like after f6 would be, black would be doing quite well. Bishop f3 would run into all sort of like moves like bishop g5, and I'm not entirely sure if white has, if black has enough, if black is doing well here, because for instance queen c5 runs into queen c5, knight c5, and bishop e7, and this is a big problem for black. And if not queen c5, let's say queen e6, then knight f4 comes with 10 piece. among many other problems in this position. Let's say then bishop h3, bishop b7, stuff like this is just really, really dangerous. So but here instead of this f6, I feel like it's very strong, putting some pressure on this on the center. If e6 knight e5, so f4 I thought is the decent move, but right after takes, this bishop right now is perfectly supports the queen side. But if we can remove this and by sacrificing the exchange, this queen comes to c6 and black has very, very strong compensation for the sacrifice material. So this would be my suggestion here what to do with black pieces. If bishop b3, just quickly show, I would just quickly show c5 and let's say bishop g5, and right now very powerful move queen e6, which is actually nice idea. This and this pretty much leads to equal endgame, but equal but still pretty much unclear. Black has definitely some chances, also white has some chances. You know this, but you know the thing is that I believe that this was the right path for black. Knight b6 is also okay. I'm not saying it's not, but queen e7 was a little bit more accurate, and I will see in a moment why. After knight b6, bishop b3. Right now, Fabiano made a big mistake because he played move queen e7. After queen e7, his position is nearly lost. Because only move was here to play c5. After c5, bishop a3, c4, bishop takes f8, and right now, yeah. Basically, Fabiano had to sacrifice the exchange. If he doesn't do it, his position is just very, very bad. So c4, bishop takes f8, queen takes f8, bishop c2, and right now knight queen c5. Everything comes pretty much forced. Knight f2, knight e3, queen b1 takes, and bishop takes f3. And I believe in this position, black has good compensation for the exchange, and it was the best what Fabiano could achieve here. After knight 7 to b6 instead of queen e7, basically he has to sacrifice the exchange. And you know, like maybe there is compensation. Okay, I'll say this: there's definitely compensation, but how big of a compensation it is in the real practical game is another question. Definitely, black has some chances to win this because of the extra exchange, and if we can, let's say, play stabilized position of queen c3, queen e3, maybe bring the rook somehow, maybe blockade the c pawn of the knight to c3. There are definitely, you know, some chances for white to win this. However, with correct play, black should eventually be alright. But from practical perspective, queen e7 was just much stronger. So here, Fabiano made big mistake, which is queen e7. After this move and e6, which Magnus played obviously, position is just nearly lost. Fabiano took, which only hastens things. Because after f takes e6, knight g5, position is just lost. Better moves were f6 or rook e8, either one of them, but none of them really solve any problems because, for instance, after f6, a4, a5, a4 trying to play a5 ourselves, so black has to play a5, that's knight f4, rook fd8, queen e2. This pawn e6 is just so powerful that strategically in all those positions white is just much better. It's just huge advantage. If let's say rook a8, queen c2, again f6 we are nearly forced everywhere to play. This is just really bad. So and finally rook fe8, same thing. This pawn a4, a5 idea is quite typical. And in this position, again, pawn e6 remains, and it's just overwhelming, nearly overwhelming. It's just very bad position for black. But anyway, it was sort of a must. This is what Fabiano had to do. Instead of he took, but after knight g5, it's just all collapsing because of this. Sorry, not this arrow. Because of this, queen c2, and those ideas here are like, you know, and also this bishop here as well on this diagonal. It's simply geometrically very bad position for black. In the game happened rook f6 and after queen c2. Let's say if g6 right now, bishop b2 can just join the game with winning position. After rook g6, very nice tactics by Magnus. Rook takes e6, and this is just game over. So Fabiano had to give the queen, but you know it just doesn't really help. Bishop d4, king h8, queen f5, Pretty good technique by Magnus. Bishop f8 right now. Just one check, two checks, and this is just resignable. And here Fabiano resigned. So just to wrap it up, this game, it was after the first loss, Magnus had to basically go all in. You know, we win, or I mean, he had to basically win this game. And right now, and in this position, he got very good position, kind of like from, let's say, practical point of view, because it was completely unexplored, and when he managed to outplay Fabiano. However, objectively, as I showed here with bishop, in here with rook e8, I feel like Fabiano had gotten out of the opening very good position. Also, if knight d5 here, ideas of knight b6 in general and then d6 immediately also would have given objectively good position. But you know, it's just like we can always say if he did that, you know, would be different. But like, you know, it's hard to, it's easy to discuss after the fact, while during the game you know it's not so easy, you know, decision making and so on. So we can't criticize Fabiano about, you know, his choices here, because especially against Magnus, who is, you know, world champion. So it's not a shame to lose to Magnus, of course. So knight 7 to b6, and only here last moment was queen e7 was the right idea but at the wrong time, because if you just play c5 here, was, you know, very good chances for black to, let's say, maintain, let's say, relative balance, because this position of exchange down would have been, let's say, definitely with some compensation for Fabiano, but he didn't do it. He instead played queen 7 in the wrong moment, and after this is just really bad, right? So this is the end of this game, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis and commentary. I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.